Well, up next, a battered wife seeks help from her church. There's just one problem. Her husband is the pastor. Find out how she's using her experience to help others right after this. Well, every 6 hours, one woman in America will die as a result of domestic violence. Every 6 hours. Our next guest is all too familiar with the pain of abuse, and for her, it came from a place she never expected.
Crime, violence, beatings, domestic abuse. Who would think this could be part of your everyday life? Marilyn Joyce, wife of a prominent pastor, was 5 months pregnant when her husband, who was supposed to be a man of God, stomped, kicked, and punched her unconscious. She lost her child and should have lost her life.
I suffered a violent attack in my home by my husband in front of my children. I was pregnant. I was about 5 months pregnant, and I miscarried in front of my children. It was a very horrible experience. I almost bled to death. The Lord intervened.
Today, she is author and motivational speaker. Marilyn Joyce has plenty to be grateful for. With a new book, If He Doesn't Deliver, and a talk show, she delivers a powerful message of hope to all who have faced the pain of abuse.
Well, Marilyn Joyce joins me now with more on how to find God's destiny for your life, no matter what situation you're in. Marilyn, welcome to the 700 Club.
Thank you
It's
for
great to
having me.
have you here.
Good to be here.
For a window of time, you were really hesitant to talk about your situation. What made you decide to go public with it?
Well, I was in a situation where I was actually jogging one day with a friend of mine. She and I were prayer partners, had been for several years, went to the same church. And we were jogging one day, and I knew that she was divorced as well as I, and didn't really know all the details, you know. And she just, one day just blurted out while we were jogging, she goes, how come being a godly woman wasn't good enough? Why is it that the more I served God, the more my husband turned against me? And that's when I discovered for the first time that she had been the victim of domestic violence, and that's what had caused her marriage to end. And well, the Lord had dealt with me, and I was healed, and He had given me some answers and some direction. And I just kind of nonchalantly said to her, well, you know, this is what happens in those situations. Because she says, well, why wasn't my marriage healed? And I said, well, you know, the Lord told me that, you know, you have to make a choice daily. He chooses and you choose. And if you choose to keep serving God and He doesn't, those choices is what divides you. And I just kept on jogging. And I went to say something else to her and looked back, and she was gone. And I looked back, and she was back in the road. She had just fallen on her knees on the ground and was sobbing and crying. And I went back to her and realized that that was what she needed to hear. She needed to know where God was in that situation. And the Lord had been dealing with me for several years about write the book, write the book. But there's so many personal things, you know, so many heartbreaking things that had happened. I was hesitant to share it. And when I saw that situation, I said, how can someone be this close to me and I not know that they need to know where God was? And so I went home and said, okay, God, I'm going to obey you, and I'll write the book. And it still was several years after that before I ever shared publicly in a service.
You were married about 2 years before there was any evidence of abuse in your own life. I mean, here you are, the wife of a man whose whole job is to lead people in the ways of God. You must have been shocked when this happened, and then you must have looked back and said, were there signs I didn't notice? And did you find any? Did you see things?
Yes, what happened was I had never seen him so much as lose his temper. And we had known each other for 5 or 6 years before we got married. We were members of the same church and everything, as part of the same youth group and all that. When it was all over with, and after I'd gotten more education, after I went to nursing school and I learned about the patterns of abuse and everything, I looked back and I saw patterns, but I didn't see them at the time. There were little bumps and pushes. We'd pass each other in the hall at home, and he would bump into me. Of course, that was accidental, you know. Yeah. I didn't know that that was part of the pattern. There were put down little comments that would be made in public, you know, all of that was part of an abusive pattern that I didn't understand.
There's a lot of shame involved in this, sometimes for the husband after the fact, always for the woman who feels like she must have done something to have caused her husband to do this. I mean, here's your husband, a pastor. Where did you go for help?
Well, I didn't. And that's one of the disadvantages when you're married to someone who pastors a church. People come to you and confide. I really had no one to confide in. When we finally did talk to somebody, we talked to someone that was one of our overseers in the ministry. And I got a lot of mixed reviews depending on which one of those leaders you talked to. Some of them gave him permission to be a batterer, and some of them just were so shocked because they didn't think that it was true. They had nothing to say. So it's a very awkward situation to be in. But I never felt that it was my fault, and I like to encourage women. There's no such thing as I've given him a reason to hit me. I never felt it was my fault. I never wondered about that for a minute, that there was something I had done that caused him to be this way. I knew that this was something that was from the enemy. I knew he needed to be delivered, and that's the way that I approached it.
You know, Marilyn, I felt when we were praying today like there was a woman out there who is afraid to make a choice to save herself and her children because she doesn't know how she's going to make it. Did you fear for that?
Yes, and in fact, the night that my husband attacked me and caused me to miscarriage in front of my children, I almost bled to death. But the doctor told me I should have bled to death within less than 4 minutes, that they didn't know why I was still alive. Our assistant pastor's wife and her husband had been at home praying, and the Lord interrupted their prayer time and said, "Get up," and gave them my name and said the word miscarriage. And they hurried to my house and found me. I had already lost the baby in the home. And it was during that time that I didn't think I was going to get out of there alive, when the Lord preserved and protected me. And like you have to understand, this wasn't an everyday occurrence. This was something that happened so seldom that
you never knew when it was coming.
Yeah,
though.
we never knew when it was coming, and I always felt like we had time. And we would go try to get counseling, and they would always say, "Well, we need to see him alone for a season." And it would be weeks later before I discovered he wasn't going to counseling anymore. That's also a pattern of an abuser, someone that doesn't want to get free. So it was trying to find someone to talk to. It was very difficult. I finally just pressed into the Lord with all that I had, with all that was within me, and I allowed the Holy Spirit to begin to teach me what I needed to be doing on a daily basis in that situation until he rescued us.
You had some tough times after you left.
Oh yes, oh yes. Well, since I had just miscarried, I was very weak. I had lost a lot of blood. We didn't have, the shelters were not as prevalent as they are today, so we didn't really have any place to live. Someone had just given me a car, and my children and I lived in that car. They didn't know when the Lord told them, "Give Marilyn a car," that we were needing a place to live. I took my kids to the garages and get gas stations and stuff. We'd bathe them, take them to daycare, and I went on to school.
You talk a lot in your book about finding your destiny. To someone who is in desperate straits right now, how do you extricate yourself from difficult, negative circumstances to find God's purpose for your life?
Well, you know, one thing the Lord told me several years ago, he says, most of what I want to accomplish through my people and with my people is going to be born out of their relationship with people, places, and things. And so God began to show me how to evaluate my relationships with people, places, and things and make the proper adjustments in light of the Word. If you know that you are around people that are negative, that are condemning, you're around people that are hurtful, that are injurious to you, that are abusive to you, you need to pull yourself out of that situation. The thing that I hear most women say is, "He makes me feel like," and you know what the Lord began to show me is that you are in control of what you feel like. And maybe someone says something that may hurt your feelings. Maybe you're in an abusive situation where this man is beating you up and telling you you're no good, which happens a lot. There's a lot of psychological abuse. And you'll hear women say, "Well, I began to buy it." You'll even hear men that have been abused say that. "I began to believe it. I began to buy into it." And what I have to say to you is that you have to agree with God. What does God say about you? You need to agree with what God says about you, and you need to disassociate yourself with anything that lifts itself up above the knowledge of God.
Obviously, you have agreed with God in your own life, and he has lifted you up. What happened to your husband?
Well, I don't stay in association with him. I don't stay in contact with him. It's my understanding that he still pastors. When we split up, I got a safe distance away. I moved out of town. I kept my phone numbers restricted, unlisted. And that's what I tell women to do. If you've gotten out of an abusive situation, most of the women who are killed by their abusers, they are still in relationship with them somehow. That is not wise to do. It is dangerous. I don't care how much you feel that he's loving and gentle in between the abusive episodes. You have to understand this is a murderous spirit that's underneath that, and the devil wants to kill, steal, and destroy you.
If you find yourself in an abusive situation and you'd like to know more about how God set Marilyn free from all of that. Her book is called If He Doesn't Deliver, and if you'll visit our website, cbn.com, we'll tell you how to find out more about her ministry and her book, or you can call our number and we'll tell you how you can get a hold of it. Thank you so much for being with us and for your candor. God bless you.
Thank you.